Hi, David. How are you?
Hello, Miles. I'm good. How are you?
Well, I guess I'm all right. I survived playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I just finished that last night.
Wow, there you go. I've been also playing it, but I have not quite finished it yet. I'm right at the end.
Yeah, I
So-
guess my final runtime was about 30 hours on the mark. Two of
Okay.
those were spent doing chin-ups.
Right. Yeah, I'm like at
Yesterday.
I think 26 or 27 hours right now, so I'm about on pace.
My girlfriend came up to me yesterday, and on my left eye, there was like a giant red vein, like one of those bloodshot. She goes, "What happened?"
I seriously took 3 tries to finish that,
Yeah,
so I just got lucky.
We'll get into that, but
Yeah, sure.
I summoned you here today for this important conversation because
Yes.
both David and we grew up playing the original Final Fantasy VII. You could say it's quite sentimental, and I guess for me, I would say it's a cornerstone in the kind of RPGs that I enjoy. Japanese games in general. I think out of all the Final Fantasy games, this one had the most, and it sounds strange to say, but Western penetration.
I don't know what it is about this game. It's I guess the setting and the characters and the content is like it's not super Japanesey. It is like as you were saying earlier, it is more Western themed.
Let's keep things a little PC here.
Japanesey.
A little Japanesey. I don't. You bet the quarantine's really getting to David.
It really is. No, I mean at the time I just had no experience at all or with that stuff.
Yeah,
I had
I understand
single-
completely, and I think that's why I know it's like very mainstream in terms of Japanese RPGs are concerned,
Right.
but I think it's also very important to kind of continuing on and fostering a huge Western audience's love for not only Final Fantasy but for other. It's kind of like one of those a rising tide lifts all ships things.
Right.
If it wasn't for Final Fantasy VII, we wouldn't have things like Parasite Eve and to a greater extent all the rest of the JRPGs that have now kind of risen to prominence on in our day-to-day lives, like even Nier and all that good stuff. Even though I recognize it's very basic, like everyone and their brothers play Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
From a personal standpoint, just having some of my redneck friends that I grew up with, like we're talking about dirt bike, mudding, going out there shooting squirrels, rednecks had even played Final Fantasy VII.
Right. Yeah, I'd never heard of any game even like this. Like I'd never heard of, our JRPG type games until this. Like but then this one was everywhere. Like everyone I knew had played it.
Yeah. It impressed me because it was the first Final Fantasy that took place in a more contemporary setting. I wouldn't exactly call it like modern. It's a little bit of Blade Runner, but it also has some more...
cyberpunkish,
Yeah.
but with also swords and magic. So,
Yeah, and that's what I liked about it. And I
Yeah.
think that was the main draw for a lot of people, and why it worked so well in the West was because, yeah, you had the overblown swords, you had the potty mouth Barrett Wallace with his machine gun arm, you had the big motorcycles. There's a lot of good Western elements into it.
evil
And
corporate greed.
corporate greed, environmentalism. It was
Yeah.
like during the 90s, we got to save the earth, save the planet, reduce, reuse, recycle. So it was hitting on a lot of those relevant themes at the time.
You gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the planet crying out in pain? I know you can!
You really hear that?
Damn straight I do!
Get help.
When I got my copy, it was at this place called KB Toys, which is a toy store. And when I went in there, of course, they had the big standee. There was a standee with Cloud kind of facing with his giant Buster Sword and the Shinra building in the background. And I was like, wow, I've never seen. I'd played RPGs like Chrono Trigger. I've played like all the Squaresoft classics back in the day, but I had never seen so much advertisement and prominence in kind of my everyday life. And when I got this, here's the thing. When I bought the game, it came bundled with a green controller, and it was
Okay.
just like a generic. It wasn't an official Sony branded controller. It was just a green controller. And I was like, oh, this is sweet. Every time I plugged in that controller, it disabled both of my memory card slots, which is so. Anytime
so
I had to
weird.
save the game, I had to like either unplug the green one, plug in my gray one, so I could
Why
hit
wouldn't you
circle.
just use the regular one?
Yeah, that I wasn't smart. I thought the green was cool enough for that. Final Fantasy VII Remake is something that I think we've been waiting for since the quote-unquote announcement of it during
Right.
the launch of the PlayStation 3. There was that concept trailer.
Right. And everyone's like, wait, you're not actually making that, but that's what we want.
I know. And I was working at GameStop near the time of the launch of the 360 and like the upcoming PS3. And one of our sales tactics was to constantly push like Final Fantasy VII, it's going to come, it's going to happen. Even though
Great.
there was no concrete information of it, the continuing development, they kept stressing just a concept trailer, just concept trailer. But
You know, I bet if
stopped
Final
us.
Fantasy 15 wouldn't have taken like 10 years to make, this would have come out sooner.
Yeah, that's true. That's a whole nother tale, Final Fantasy 15's development. But
Yeah.
it's something that's been in the public consciousness for a while. And I feel that in the late 2000s, like from about 2005 to about 2008 or so, there was like that weird period of Final Fantasy VII resurgence. Like you had all the spin-off games and the movies, like you had Advent Children, which was another big deal because we thought we were going to get something substantial, like they were going to follow it up with the remake and tie it in. And then you had Dirge of Cerberus, which was the weird Vincent third-person shooter.
I've never played any of the spin-off games.
I really don't like any of the spin-off content, including Advent
Great.
Children. I think
I like parts of that movie, but it's a little cheesy, I think.
Where's Mother? Damn sign.
the parts people like about Advent Children are the fight scenes, but like story-wise, it does not make Final Fantasy VII any better. And
No,
I
agree.
I feel the same thing is true for Dirge of Cerberus and even Crisis Core to a certain extent. I do like the ending of Crisis Core, but everything that takes place after or before Final Fantasy VII isn't really my cup of tea. And I think they milked out the franchise throughout all the subsequent spin-offs, and that's what concerned me the most is like how much of that milking, how much of that weird extended lore stuff they're gonna go into and push for the remake. So I ended up playing it nonstop. I think the first night I put 10 hours into it. The next day I put something around 12 hours into it.
Jeez.
Like I was just playing it in between like my normal daily routine. Where my normal daily routine was, that was what I replaced Final Fantasy with in there. I would say my first impression of the game came from the demo, and I didn't enjoy the demo that much.
I never played the demo, so I have no experience with that.
The
Which
demo-
chunk of the game is the demo?
The demo takes place during the first Mako reactor bombing, and in that small demo, you get to play as Cloud and Barrett. It's just up until the point wherever they're leaving the reactor's about to explode, and then it cuts, and it just shows kind of like a trailer of some of the things that are going to happen. I wasn't digging it at first because the battle system is very intricate compared to the original. Also character switching, I wasn't aware of the hotkeys, and the stagger system, of course, that has been kind of a staple since Final Fantasy 13 now. So a lot of these elements kind of felt strange to me, and I think that portion of the game doesn't really do justice of what lies ahead in the later parts, like with of course the towns, the side questing, the
I mean,
characters
I
really-
agree with that, because after I started the game, after the first few hours, I'm like, yeah, this game's good, but it's not like the best game ever kind of thing. But it definitely keeps on growing on you the more you play, I think.
I think that's one thing that I will write home is like the progression in this game. It does kind of amp things up and get a little bit bigger and involved as it goes along, but not always to its benefit.
Sleep and dream the sweetest dreams.
Why don't you lead us off? What is the first thing you liked about this game?
I Well, I made more than a list of 3, but I'll start with the biggest one. I think is that they really expanded the Avalanche characters,
Yeah.
Biggs, Jesse, Wedge. Like I really liked that they
Yeah.
fleshed that story out more.
I think I had mentioned that in my likes as well, just a general expansion upon the characters, and we didn't really get a feel for who they were, what their objectives were beyond like saving the planet, and
Right.
like that moment where you get to go to Jesse's house and
Yeah.
with the crew, they're eating pizza and stuff, and then you kind of get this weird peek into Jesse's life. Like she wanted to be an actress, and then you go into that room and find her father, who used to work out one of the Mako reactors, and he's like suffering from the poisoning. So I think that's one thing that was missing in the original, is like you didn't get to see the greater impact of like how Mako was not only like this economic powerhouse, but like how it kind of put into place this weird caste system. Like there's these people at the top, they're living in the lap of luxury essentially, and then like the different strata below. And,
Yeah, I
like,
mean, they tried to explain that and get into that in the original game, but just didn't really show.
yeah.
Like they mentioned it in passing, but this does a better job of fully explaining everything going on.
And it's funny that Jessie was like more middle class. She wasn't in the upper echelon. Her dad worked for the reactor. They're well off enough to not live in the slums. They were just kind of like in the middle class sector. And then
They're in the working, the like employee sector.
Yeah.
Of Midgar.
I like that too. I especially liked Wedge because his voice actor was Badger from Breaking Bad.
Sure I can't tempt you with some more?
Maybe just a couple slices, Mrs. R.
Wedge!
Hey, I'm doing it for you guys. You don't want me going to work on an empty stomach.
One thing is, like, I wish that they would have switched Biggs and Wedge's names, because you'd think the fat guy's name would be Biggs. Looks exactly like Charlie Sheen. For some reason, I just kept looking at him, I'm like, oh my god, that's him in Hot Shots. I was like, what's he up to? I'm sure he's pretty cheap to hire. Just put Charlie Sheen in the game.
Yeah.
Oh man, he's dealing with some Mako poisoning. Aerith has always been like one of those weird points of contention for me. Like on the Game Facts boards back in the day, or like on all these character polls, like people talk about like the most emotionally impactful scene of all video games, and then of course, spoiler for a 20-year-old game, but Aerith's death, and of course, like building.
I didn't
up
care
to
that much when I was a kid when I played the original game. I'm like, oh yeah, she existed. I barely even used hers.
Aerith was a character that I never really used too much in battle at all in the original. She just didn't have too much to her character beyond like she's special because she was born as part of the Cetra race and they're part of the Ancients, and
that was her entire character.
Her entire character is that she's a plot device for Shinra to want to kidnap her and bring them to like the whole Promised Land arc.
Well, that's another thing. Like you get so used to her not being in your party because you get her late and then she's taken away so many times. I'm just like, well, I guess I just won't use her because I just don't care.
And if you're playing it like multiple times through, what's the incentive to like want to build up her character?
Right. Yeah. After you beat it once, you're like, well, I'll play it again, but I'm still not going to use her because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. At first I was like, her voice actress is a little dorky and weird.
Yeah, she kind of grew on me a little bit, but at first in the remake, I found her very annoying.
Looked like you knew each other.
Maybe he thought I could be the greatest soldier yet.
Forget it.
You mad?
You play as her in a few chapters, like where you're going out to Seventh Heaven to save Marlene, and it kind of shows her like selflessness and her sacrifice for the cause. In terms of like having her as a character in battle, I used her a lot more than I thought I would. I really liked her ability to like stand back and just kind of snipe with her magic, and also like heal the entire party with her prayer. That's something I never thought I would do, is like use her actively throughout. Yeah, the characters were well done. I think Barrett Wallace stole the show most of the time.
He's great. He has a lot of good lines.
Damn right. Leading man sticks around to the credits roll.
The original Final Fantasy VII did have a lot of foul language. It didn't censor itself all that much. Like I guess like it censored the F word a few times. But it had shit, it had damn, it had Barrett punching holes in things and screaming. And I was worried that a lot of those elements for Final Fantasy Remake would be removed or softened a little bit, but no, they weren't.
I couldn't care less about the rest, but that shit.
Yeah, I did like that too. I was worried about that, especially like the wall market area. I thought they were gonna water a lot of that down, but they didn't seem to.
No, so here's one thing I was thinking about. Oh boy, the scene's coming up. The scene's coming up where they're going up to Don Corneo's mansion. In my mind, I thought they were going to remove two things. They were going to remove Cloud's cross-dressing scenario and the dialogue about stomping on Don Corneo's balls. Like, those are the two things. Those worries were ill-founded. They had it in it. Not only did they had Cloud's cross-dressing moment, anyone thinking that it wasn't going to have any, like, gay undertones, they amped it up for this one. There is a full-on dance number. Like,
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it was fun. It was really fun. And I think, you know, in terms of like 2020, it was handled fairly respectfully.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts, though, is like whenever Cloud's in the dress and he's like walking around Walmart and there's all those cat calls going on.
Yeah.
And, hey, look at that hot stuff.
Yeah, that was...
Whoa. She is the most so beautiful. It's almost surreal. Who is she? I need to learn everything about her.
Corneo's very creepy, as I hoped he would be.
Yeah, that's another thing that they
facial
fleshed out.
Animation is perfect. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the animations and like the ways, like, so I think they were trying to express a lot of the creepiness of these characters and like over the topness. Like Don Corneo's one of them that I feel is just like, you can't connect with the original Don Corneo because he's like a giant Lego figure and he's just kind of like wandering around on his bed and all that. But I think in this one, like they got the tattoo on his head, the pencil thin John Waters mustache. His tongue is just hanging out, and he looks like a toad.
He's creep.
What was that?
Don't you worry your pretty little head. Just a picture to preserve the moment.
But they also did the same with Hojo, too. I think they made him even creepier during his dialogue where he's at the round table at the Shinra building talking about all the experiments he wants to do. He's like, we're going to crossbreed the ancient with something else. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of fucked up. They're gonna pick out a soldier to breed with Aerith. I'm feeling a little weird, but yeah, all the characters, like even the sub characters, had some characterization, and
they introduced some new characters for like the new plot points, which is a little weird.
One thing I wrote down was the motorcycle guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was my favorite addition. So they put a motorcycle scene before the actual highway battle that's supposed to take place.
Yeah, it's like when they're prepping for the second reactor bombing, there's like a mission section where you're going to get some new... It doesn't matter. You're going to do something to prep for the mission, and they added all new sections, including a new character, which was very strange.
So you're driving to Jessie's house so she can get more materials to make a smaller bomb. And as you're driving, you're just on a regular motorcycle. All of a sudden, Shinra starts coming in, and you're fighting them off and stuff, like normal. And then some random, like, original character they made up for this game who's just sexually aroused by motorcycles and having battles on motorcycles shows up, and he's like, yeah, you're pretty good. See ya.
Come on, let's push it past the red line!
Later on, when you're getting the materials, he shows up, you have a sword fight, and then more motorcycles, and you never see him again.
Yeah. That was so bizarre.
I thought that was a good addition. I would have liked more additions like him. Like, hey, I'm here to stretch out the game a little bit more. All right, I'm gone. Bye. Yep. Not plot relevant whatsoever.
I do have a question, just simply because I don't remember.
Yeah.
In the original game, was there this huge subplot of a war with Wutai going on? Because I don't remember that at all.
So it's the translation on the original Final Fantasy VII is really bad.
Okay.
There is, like, in the original translation, there's like more references to the war with Wutai, and especially in Crisis Core, that's the whole focus of the game is Shinra versus Wutai. Yeah, the Wutai thing was understated in the original one, but they kind of talk about it in conversation like Heidegger.
It's like a main plot point now because that's why they're like framing Avalanche for all this stuff.
Yeah,
and I didn't remember that subplot at all.
As I said, that was mostly understated in the original. A positive that I had in my notes was the battle system in general. I like action RPGs. I like the original Nier a lot. I like Parasite Eve, even though it kind of had more turn-based elements. You could move around the field and plot out things. And I think this one had like the best of both worlds. Like they had the weight system, like wherever you could, use the traditional ATB and select out your moves and stuff like that. But I stuck with the action-based one throughout.
Yeah, I did too.
And I think just the fast nature of it made me feel more engaged in the battles. Like this had probably more boss battles than I was expecting.
Oh yeah.
It seemed like every 5 to 10 minutes there's a new big boss, and they went over the top with some of them. I was surprised by how many original monsters from 7 were included, and especially one in particular in the Coliseum showing up there. Well, because I got to a certain point in the game, I'm like, oh, I guess that one enemy's not showing up. That's a bummer. And then they just made it into a huge spectacle. Like that was one huge nod to the fans. You have the Turks, and the Turks battles were brutal with Rude and Reno, and they were challenging. I found myself in many positions in the game where I was having to think on my feet and change up my strategies based on what the enemies were doing. Versus like the original turn-based, like wherever it's like kind of like Pokemon, like each character has a weakness that you can use and just spam that and heal up. Cloud has an ability where he can switch between 2 modes of battle, like one more light swipes and running, like a quicker one, and then Punisher mode, which is like heavy hits and breaking through barriers and stuff. So I liked switching between that, and I also liked like how quickly you could issue commands from other characters too. So you could just like hit R2, it slows down time, you switch to that other character, or you can just tell them to do a command. And just really have full control of the field. And that's something that I wasn't expecting to work so well.
Yeah, same. I do have one complaint, I guess, about the battle system.
Okay.
So most of the game I just played as Cloud and I never switched characters. And because I equipped him with so many ATB bonuses that he always had like full bars. Like I would just spam abilities because like by the time one ability was done, like I already had another bar.
Yeah.
So it was so fast, but when you're not controlling a character, their bar charges considerably slower.
Yes.
So when you're controlling a character, it seems like it's at least 3 or 4 times faster than when they're not selected. So support characters, I don't want to be a support character, so I'm waiting for them to support me, and since I'm not playing as them, their bar fills so slowly that they never actually get to do anything. Well, so you have to, if you want support, you have to switch to that character so their bar charges faster, and then switch back.
When it comes to 7, the Materia system is very all over the place because you can build a character in such a way to where it absolutely breaks the game, or it changes up like how they play in particular. For example, I played as Barrett a lot of the way, and what I would do is I would know what was coming up, so I'm gonna face off against a robot. I'd switch over to Barrett, I'd have like an elemental affinity equipped to his gun, and just have him constantly spam.
Yeah, I have bullets. Cloud with a fire sword and Barrett with lightning bullets.
Yeah, stuff like that. And then you can also do things like where you set up auto commands, like Tifa had an auto heal materia, so every time I was getting low, she'd just be like, potion, throwing those out there. I would say the materia system's a double-edged sword. It can be like really interesting, like the deeper you get into it, but like also exploitable to a point.
Yeah, you can just stack stuff so you're super strong.
Right. But I had fun with it, and it was neat seeking out all the different materias and changing up the strategies. But I disagree. I think that I liked in Remake especially how much they changed up the party for you. Instead of really giving you the freedom, it was more chapter dependent. It's like this chapter, you're going to use Cloud and Bear. This chapter, it's going to be Aerith and Tifa. So the roster that would just be on the bench most of the time when I would play originally,
they're
I'm
just not
playing
available.
as them.
Oh yeah, you are you're forced to use every character.
In Final Fantasy XIII, they followed this same structure to wherever each chapter, it would just center around this one character and like another party member, and they also had like leveling caps, so you couldn't like go beyond a certain level. So it's just like every person had the same prescribed experience, so you'd get to this one, it's like, well, I can't go above this level, I can't grind, and I have to play as like a mage, and I have to play as this kid with a boomerang. That restriction just turned me off.
Yeah, well, I mean, with this system, you can build any character to be anything you want. Like,
yeah,
you just
pretty much.
Dump materia. You could make Aerith melee tank if you wanted to. Like,
yeah, she does have some pretty strong melee weapons in there, and I think like each one of the weapons was kind of well defined into like three categories. It was either an attack, it was a magic one, or as a balance, like 50-50 split.
Well, there's also crit weapons too that all the bonuses are increased luck and crit chance and stuff.
Yeah, and your materia could do that as well too.
Oh, I liked how you get summons in this game.
Summons in the original Final Fantasy VII were just like you would find summons on the ground most of the time.
And then you just have them. You're like, there you go. Here's Shiva. You just found him in a chest.
I liked it too. What they did was they kind of borrowed the Final Fantasy XIII summon thing, like wherever you have to build up a summon gauge and unleash them. In the original 7, like, summons were kind of more of a commodity, like you just use them like typical magic.
Right.
But here, getting the summon, you had to prove your worth, and it was very much like Final Fantasy XIII. Like you actually,
I like the whole battle intel system where you're rewarded for trying out all these different styles and using every single thing the game gives you access to. You're rewarded for it. And then usually by getting new summons.
David, I'll have you lead off with your dislikes before I get into mine.
Yeah, but a lot of mine are more minor gripes than general dislikes.
I want to hear minor gripe. Let's go for it.
Fine, I've got a list of minor gripes, but I'll start with one that I think has come up the most for me personally, is that there's no photo mode.
On your PlayStation, there is a share button.
But you can't like go into a first person mode and look around.
Right.
So there's no way to get the characters out of the way.
It's a beautiful game too. There's certain aspects or like little areas that I'm trying to position the camera, because I was doing that when I was capturing footage. I'm like, oh, I want to get like this full picture of the slums or of the wall market, and I want to get the entire honeybee in. Like they put all this incredible texture work, and the way they light the sets is like for HDR.
There's a few times I'm like, man, I wish I could easily just get a photo of this.
Yeah,
and I can't.
Like pan that camera out and like have
a lot of games have a photo mode where you just control like a camera in a first person perspective and you just aim it wherever, or at least turn off the character models so I can just take a picture.
Yeah, that's a good gripe. It's a really good gripe.
That's a good gripe.
All right, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay, I wrote this down, and it's like a little paragraph, but I said, the sense of restraint or hallway syndrome. I didn't expect the open world, but I was getting exhausted by the endless hallways of junk and trash by the end of the game. Worst of all are the Gears of War slow walking segments between story moments or when entering a new area. Hated when the game would slow down or when the game would take full control away from the player and prevent you from exploring in the presence of a cutscene that's about to happen. So there will be a moment like, hey, I'm in a new area. I want to look around. Nope. Here's a giant exclamation.
It points the camera at something and it makes you slowly walk towards it for like 30 seconds.
No. Turn around. Walk your ass back that way.
Yeah, if you try to go somewhere else, it's like, hey, Cloud, where are you going?
The mayor is waiting. Where do you think you're going? The mayor is waiting.
And that happens so many times throughout the game. And I I know the original was a fixed camera angle and you're on a pre-rendered background, and there was a lot of that in the original, but I don't think it needs to be in this one. Like, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to run over there, grab that treasure chest, and then proceed on with the story. Like,
yeah, you have to remember until after all the cutscenes to go back to that area and get that.
And the worst part was, like, there was this fight in the church wherever the camera slowly like goes on to Reno, and there's a Materia out in the corner, and all I thought about was like, oh fuck, I forgot that Materia. I want to go back and get that, and then there's no way to go back there until like way later. Yeah, you're like, oh shit, I gotta go back there,
and then you go back there, and it's not even good anyway. I'm like, oh,
yeah, it's like just some random ass skill Materia, and like nothing.
They
good.
give you a lot of stuff. They're like, oh, I've got like 7 fire Materias. It's like, okay, cool. I don't know why I'm gonna need all these.
There's so many haters of Final Fantasy 15 out there, but when I played that game, like, I never felt like I was restrained. I could always like get up and leave this dungeon and go out into an open world, get a breather, because I know thematically speaking, Midgar's supposed to feel like this whole area is like oppressed. There's just an overarching theme of oppression going on, but throughout the game, there's just so many moments like where they have the camera like squeeze into a crevice with Cloud, and you have to slowly creep along a fence or creep along a wall.
Yep. And there are a lot of things that slow you down.
Yeah, and they're doing that to load assets like out there ahead. The way it's handled in here, it happens way too much. And
it feels more tedious when you're doing the side quests and you have to do a lot of backtracking. So you're like, oh, I have to run through this section like 20 times.
Yeah,
and have to walk
the slow crawl each time. Or I have to duck under this rubble and debris. I also think coming off of Final Fantasy 15, like, some people are like, you warp, you fly around too much, but I just like the ability to jump. I like the ability to kind of like fly around a little bit. And I think the rules and the logic in terms of gravity in Final Fantasy VII are not consistent whatsoever. Like, there will be times
in battle against flying creatures, you can just jump up and start attacking.
Yeah, you jump up like 20 feet in the air and just swipe, and I just felt very restricting in that regard. Like, I'm still climbing ladders, I'm still going through all these curves.
Yeah, you have to like go through whole puzzles to move like a small box out of the way so you can progress. When in a fight, you could jump like 10 times higher.
Yeah, you can jump way higher. Like that whole scene, like where you're moving these boxes to get Aerith across with the
hands and stuff. Hands. Oh my god,
it's so like cool. Just give her a piggyback up or something like that. Because you see that scene like where there's like, hey, Tifa, catch, and then throws her. Throws her in the fucking air. I just think that sticking too closely with traditional, like, slow-moving areas and, like, restricted hallways, and even the towns felt like hallways to me. Like, there's usually, like, 3 lanes that split off, and just wasn't a fan of that. Just
you couldn't even, like, just talk to a bunch of random NPCs just to say, hey, how's it going? Like, there's not a lot of flavor text, just...
Yeah, I'll get into that.
Through the areas.
All right, ready for my next gripe?
Sure.
All right, so you're gonna like this because you almost stole it, and that's why I detoured you there. I said, how they handled conversations with the vast majority of NPCs. Remake is loaded with a ton of NPCs that react to the current events in the story. They do add some detail to the world at large, but they made them into motion-activated big mouth Billy Basses, set dressing pieces that really don't add anything. When you walk into a crowd, you get all these conversations overlapping in giant text box lists that you can't possibly read all of them. Meanwhile, your characters are also carrying out a conversation with plot relevant information. You don't know what you should be paying attention to. And I compared the situation to Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, all the schizophrenic voices she has in her head. Whenever you walk through town, and I'm playing with like 5.1 surround sound, so I'm just hearing everybody like talking about their day, like, oh, I'm in so much misery. Where's Grandpa at? We've got to stop Shinra. Like, I cannot focus on all that.
People riding in the freight car. Guess they don't have much choice, but rather them than me.
Are you the one who's so cramped? Do something like that. Do you mind? I'm trying to work here. I'll be nice and talk to my brothers.
Hey,
You
got a
see,
sec?
my daughter
Should've
now
never
lives
gotten
in
out of bed
Sector
this
8,
morning.
so...
Just called in sick.
I don't know if that's to the game's benefit. Like, I know they're trying to modernize it. Like, oh, you're just walking into a conversation like you would be like out in the real world. Like, you just stumble upon people chattering. But I would have liked the option to like toggle it or hit triangle. Like, go over. If I want to go hear what the crowd's got to say, I'll just boom. Okay, now I can pay attention and invest in it. And it just never. It felt like I had less interaction with the world because I couldn't go up and talk to that random NPC. And I think less is more in that regard. Have less people just constantly littering the place, or at least make it kind of more like Yakuza. Like how Yakuza has like those little blue marks over their heads.
You can just go talk to them.
You can go talk to them and hear what they're saying about the given situation and stuff. But I think they also tried that Yakuza thing, but they didn't do it as successfully. Like in Yakuza, when you talk to somebody, it kind of comes out with its own independent bubble, with its own background. Meanwhile, there's like a fucking like stock market ticker on the left-hand side of all these different things. Like, who's saying what? I have no point of reference of who's talking when I walk by this crowd.
Like, little boy said this. It's just 20 different text boxes open, and you're like, I guess someone's talking about this. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just hard to pinpoint the source. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake owes a lot to the Yakuza series because it's structured in a very similar degree.
Oh, yeah, you'd have a bunch of plot stuff, and then they're like, well, you can go to the next plot point whenever you want, but you can finish all these side quests.
Yeah, it's structured like damn near the same, and like it even has its own sub-stories category, so you can see like, okay, I've done this, here are the conditions to go do that. And I
do like the checklist, so you know when to move on.
And I like because there's several points in the game where they actually say, hey, don't leave this area, otherwise you're going to miss out on these items, or are you sure you want to go do this? Because this
that happened in certain, even just like in a hall, like one of those hallway sections. I just started going, and they're like, if you don't get this now, you'll never be able to get it. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go do that.
I think that's good though, because the Final Fantasy VII has a lot of those points in the original where you could not go back, and you just missed that materia for the whole game. It didn't have a chapter select. It didn't have any way to go back. You just had to start over. And the first disc especially is filled with those moments. Like, depending on how well you did on a mini game or not, you just miss it.
The backgrounds, we had that conversation yesterday. Like the skybox and backgrounds, some of them look like they're straight out of the original game.
Yeah, they kind of have that weird low res wrap. Like, they don't even wrap sometimes. Like, it feels like
it's just
I'm staring into like
a JPEG plastered on the back.
Like you're on the set of some Hollywood movie, and they have those like one painted backdrops, like of a sky or of like just all these buildings and stuff. Like when you're trying to climb up to the Shinra building, especially.
Yes, that's when it was the most noticeable, because like most of the game, you see all these high res like models everywhere, and then you can see glimpses of like the skybox behind it, and you're like, oh, that's fine or whatever. But in this one, like, it makes you focus, like, take a minute and look at that wreckage or whatever. You're looking at this JPEG in the background that's like significantly lower res than the rest of the game.
Hey, that's not that good. You could have thrown that through like a 4K scaler or something, like one of those AI renderers.
Yeah.
Most of Final Fantasy VII Remake is in interiors, so you're like inside tunnels, you're inside sewers, but like those sparse moments, like where you get a broader scope of the world, just makes you feel even more claustrophobic. You're like,
it really does, because there's no depth to these backgrounds. It just looks like an image, so it's very strange. A lot of the textures look fine, but sometimes there's like a random super low res texture like that just pops out at me.
There's a lot of texture pop in this game.
And I've also noticed texture pop in too, even on the Pro. Like, it still happens.
But
I think that's the problem with the Unreal Engine. That's just
right.
That's how it is.
Maybe this will be something that they update for the PlayStation 5 and the whole solid state buzzword shit. But I think it could definitely benefit from that. I just have a lot of concerns like going forward. And we'll move into my last point. Maybe I won't spoil everything for you, David, but
because I'm close to the end, but I'm not quite there. But I did, for any haters online, I gave him permission to talk about the ending. So,
there's always going to be haters no matter what.
An a-hole friend that's like, oh, by the way, Snape kills Dumbledore.
Just by the very virtue of talking about a device.
I mean, I've played the original multiple times, so I know the basic plot points.
Everyone should know it by now, and if not, I mean, like, what are you doing watching the video in the first place? But Anyway, spoiler alert for everyone. My final point, my final gripe is this. Literal Deus Ex Machina story elements to subvert the original plot. The Whispers were by far the worst addition to Remake. Damn near ruined the game for me with their Kingdom Hearts-esque nonsense. Let's just throw in alternate dimensions and timelines instead of building upon an already decent framework. The Whispers show up the first time you meet Aerith. Cloud is walking through Midgar, and then he runs into Aerith, and Aerith is selling flowers. All of a sudden, these ghosts show up and start flying around and like coming out of the shadows and hopping in and out of bodies, and you don't know what the hell's going on.
No, I like how nobody questions it until like the end of the game. They're like, what are those things anyway? Like 30 hours in.
What are these things? They're these cloaked figures that fly around and you don't know, like, are they good? Are they bad? What is their purpose on the plot?
Yeah, it's super weird.
Every time they're introduced to the plot, it just gets worse. Like the second time around, there's a giant tornado in the like right in front of Seventh Heaven, and it's preventing you from going in, and you have to battle them. And the battles just feel weird. Like you're just constantly attacking a lead whisperer, and it doesn't do anything. There's no reaction. They barely comment on it. And they're like, "Oh wow, this crazy demon tornado just tore through town," and well, let's move on. Just whenever you're starting to say, man, I really like all the updates that they made to the plot, like the characters have great funny conversations, and things are on track, and it's moving very fast pace. A tornado of ghosts show up, swirl around you. You have to fight them. Their only purpose in the plot is to slow you down from doing something. Like either plot-centric or just in general to stretch out the game. Red 13 shows up and explains like, oh yes, they're the voices of the earth, and they
I love how like they show up all the time, and no one even seems to like mention them. They're like, oh, I guess those ghost guys showed up again. It's not even until the end of the game where someone's like, what are those things anyway?
And they are here to guide you on fate's journey, on destiny's path. Right. Don't worry about them. If you're destined to live, then they'll keep you on that track. Why do I even need them? Why not just have the character live or die, or why not have the actions unfold without the whispers? We need that?
They're lame.
I don't want to spoil the end for you, but it gets even more ridiculous at the very end. Like I think it damn near ruined the story for me because they don't. This is how I was. It was like 11:30 last night. I was playing. I was like, this should have ended 3 fucking hours ago. Like, why? Why is this necessary? This does not make the plot better. It doesn't add anything. It's like deliberate stretching. And like, if you're a new player to the game and you get to these points, it's gonna sour your impression of the legacy. I think in general, you're gonna be like. How did people tolerate this weirdness, I guess? Yeah, I just was not a fan of the last few segments in general of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, once you get to the Shinra building, I don't think it's as interesting as the original. Like, it doesn't give you the options of how you want to infiltrate.
Yeah, I did like the original Shinra building more, I think, because you did more stuff on each floor. Like, each floor had its own puzzle you had to solve and people you had to interact with. And, and this year's like, it literally just shuttles you along like a tour of the building.
There is like a little museum segment that I thought was cool in the remake, like where you get to learn about the history of Shinra and each one of the characters. It's kind of a rogue gallery. They show off like here's all the baddies and here's their purpose in the plot, but we're going to expand on them later, maybe in the second game. In the original one, there was kind of like a bit more mini games. There's more secrets to find. I think they had like that VR simulator. That was probably the one unique thing they added in the Shinra building that I thought was pretty cool. But the thing was, and this is what really pissed me off, I did all the VR simulator fights, and they were pretty tough fights because you have to play with each individual character, then the team, so on and so forth. It took me a good hour or so. Then I get up into the vents, like you go in the bathroom, you go in the vents to go like spy on their little meeting. And I looked down through the first vent, and then the game would not let me back out of that vent.
Oh, no.
Like, I couldn't hit circle to exit out of that cam, so I've got footage of me just being stuck there, and I had to close out of the game. Like, I could not,
no.
I couldn't save, I couldn't do anything. I had to close out of the game. I lost all my VR battle data progress.
That's a huge bummer.
And I was screaming, so I just fucking kind of hate steamrolled my way through the rest of the game. I think it kind of falls apart near the end, like Hojo's lab goes on for way too long.
Yeah,
the Shinra
that's where I
buildings.
am now, and I noticed that was one of my other gripes. Is there's a few certain sections of the game that are just they go on too long.
Yeah,
like this. I think when you're under the plate, like in the undercarriage of the plate, that part goes on a little bit too long.
Yeah.
Some stuff in the sewers goes on too long. Like there's certain sections that are just too
sewers
much.
in general in games like.
Well, and then you got to revisit the sewers and do it all again.
Yeah, and another side of the sewers, and then go through a rat chasing thing, and a lot of that stuff was in the original. But I think if you're going to remake something, like trim the fat a little bit, you know. It had some great momentum in the beginning, but I think it loses it near the end, and like just the emptiness, the uncertainty of what's to come. Like left a bad taste in my mouth at the end. So I'm not going to poo-poo on the whole experience because overall I'd say it's worthwhile. I had a great time. The soundtrack alone is phenomenal. All the remixes.
I love all the remix songs. They're great.
Yeah.
And there's multiple versions because there's the version they play in the game, and then there's also the versions like the jukebox versions.
Yeah, so I did want to comment on that. So each rest spot that you visit, it just heals all your HP and MP. But there's also a vending machine that has like an exclusive track, like a remix that plays. Or if you're like roaming around town, people have their radios on and you can hear like a different remix. And at the same time, that also leaves me feeling a tad empty because it's like, oh, it's the Golden Saucer thing.
Yeah, I really want to go to the Golden Saucer now.
That I won't be able to hear for like maybe 2 years or something. And they honored a lot of obscure things of Final Fantasy VII that I didn't think would be in there. Not everything's in there, but you know, of course, like the Hell House and little things like that made it great. The battle system was way better, but in the same
game
hand,
did want me to make me want to go back and play the original again.
It did. Like I'm like, man, I kind of want to pick it up and just like remember and prep myself for the upcoming one, but I'm left with a lot more worries plot wise, and I think once you get to the ending, you'll understand why. Like they just went a little fan servicey in one part and then just stupid Kingdom Hearts nonsense interdimensional stuff that does not make for a better game, I think. Also, Zack's voice actor is the worst voice actor of the entire cast.
Embrace your dreams. And whatever happens, protect your honor. As a soldier! Come and get it!
Thank you very much, David, for joining us today. King
that was
Game
a good chat.
Right there.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, this is we're keeping our distance.
Yeah.
But thanks for joining us, and I appreciate it, man. We should do this again.
Yep.
All right, stay safe out there.